What makes a war film feel real? The smell of gunpowder, the chaos of surf pounding blood-streaked sand, the trembling silence before a charge that could end everything. D-Day was more than invasion. It was humanity's test under fire. Some filmmakers dared to recreate that horror with truth and heart. These are the D-Day movies veterans still respect for their courage and brutal honesty. Number 15. The Longest Day, 1962. When The Longest Day premiered, it was hailed as an epic masterpiece, a film that dared to tell the story of D-Day from every side. Allied, German, civilian, shot in stark black and white, it mirrored the grim tone of real war. The film assembled an army of stars from John Wayne to Sean Connery to Henry Fonda. But its true star was its realism. The movie recreated the Normandy invasion with military precision. Over 10,000 extras were used, many of them real soldiers and local French villagers. Veterans who watched it said the chaos, the noise, and the confusion felt exactly as they remembered. There were no heroes, just men facing impossible odds. The studios feared it was too bleak, too long, too uncommercial, but audiences worldwide responded with reverence. Behind the scenes, the shoot was as massive as the operation itself. Filmed on location in Normandy, the production faced violent storms. Tanks sank into mud. Landing craft overturned. Crew members collapsed from exhaustion. Darryl F. Zanuck, who directed and produced the film, was said to have aged a decade during its making. Critics called it cold and emotionless, but veterans saw in it something deeper. The numbness of survival. Today, The Longest Day stands as the definitive dramatization of D-Day. No explosions for spectacle, just truth. It is a film that soldiers still show their sons to say this is what it was like. Number 14. Overlord, 1975. Overlord was not a hit. It came quietly and disappeared. But those who saw it never forgot. Mixing real archival footage of the D-Day landings with a fictional story of a young British soldier named Tom, it became one of the most haunting portrayals of war ever filmed. Shot in grainy black and white by director Stuart Cooper, it feels like a memory. Half dream, half nightmare. Tom trains, marches, jokes with friends, and slowly realizes he is walking toward death. The British War Office supported the production, giving Cooper access to reels of combat film shot by military cameramen who died in the field. There was no censorship or propaganda. The result was too real. The BBC refused to broadcast it in full, fearing it would demoralize post-war audiences. Some veterans called it poetry. Others said it reopened wounds that had never healed. The sound design is chilling. Silence before bombardment. Then the sea explodes. Overlord was lost for decades until it was rediscovered and restored by the British Film Institute. Critics now rank it among the greatest war films ever made. Veterans who see it today say it captures not the tactics of battle, but the helplessness of young men trapped in the machinery of war. It is not about glory, it is about inevitability. Number 13. Saving Private Ryan, 1998. When Steven Spielberg released Saving Private Ryan, it redefined how war could be shown on film. The first 20 minutes of the Omaha Beach landing became legendary. Veterans wept. Some left theaters shaking. The realism was overwhelming. Spielberg shot the sequence with handheld cameras and desaturated color to mimic World War II footage. He told his crew to make it feel like a documentary. Blank shells were fired inches from the actors' faces. Real amputees portrayed soldiers losing limbs. The screams were recorded from live-fire training exercises. Even Tom Hanks admitted the experience broke him. The Department of Defense initially resisted supporting the project. They feared the brutality would turn audiences against modern warfare. But Spielberg refused to soften the truth. When the film premiered, many veterans organizations publicly thanked him. The realism was so intense that counselors were stationed in some cinemas for older soldiers suffering flashbacks. Behind the scenes, the cast underwent boot camp under Marine veteran Dale Dye. For days, they lived as real soldiers. No showers, no sleep, no script rehearsals. It built the exhaustion visible on screen. Saving Private Ryan went on to win 5 Academy Awards. But its legacy is not gold. It is the emotional scar it left on audiences. Veterans called it the closest Hollywood had ever come to D-Day. Spielberg did not glorify. He reminded the world that freedom has a cost paid in youth and silence. Number 12. A Bridge Too Far. 1977. When A Bridge Too Far hit theaters, it divided audiences. Some called it the most ambitious war film ever made. Others said it was too cold, too intellectual, too sprawling. But for many veterans, it was a mirror of hard truth. It dared to show not triumph, but failure. Directed by Richard Attenborough, it told the story of Operation Market Garden, the Allied gamble to end the war quickly by seizing bridges across the Netherlands. It was a bold plan that collapsed into disaster. The film captured that chaos with chilling accuracy. Massive parachute drops filmed with real aircraft. Explosive ground battles staged on the actual Dutch locations where men fought and died. The production nearly collapsed from its own scale. Weather delays, technical breakdowns, actors injured in explosions. Sean Connery reportedly threatened to quit when the realism became too much. Richard Attenborough refused to stage anything fake. He demanded real tanks, real smoke, real fatigue. Every scene became a battle to complete. The film was criticized for being too long and too grim. American studios wanted a hero story. Attenborough gave them futility instead. He showed generals blundering and soldiers dying for a plan that was doomed from the start. Though not directly about D-Day, the film's spirit captured the same realism veterans recognized. The confusion, the courage, the tragic waste. Over time, it gained respect among soldiers who saw in it the honesty missing from Hollywood myth-making. It was not about victory. It was about the price of ambition. Number 11. The Big Red One, 1980. Sam Fuller's The Big Red One was personal. Fuller himself was a combat veteran who had landed on Omaha Beach on D-Day. This was his story. But when the film came out, it was misunderstood and ignored. Too raw, too strange, too honest. The film followed a small infantry squad from North Africa to the beaches of Normandy and beyond. Unlike most war movies, there were no grand speeches, no romantic subplots, just dirt, sweat, and fear. Lee Marvin played the weary sergeant leading boys too young to shave. The opening D-Day sequence is shot with grim simplicity. No swelling music, just silence, gunfire, and bodies floating in the surf. Fuller fought studio executives who wanted a more heroic tone. They cut his original 3-hour version to pieces. The result lost much of its emotional rhythm. Critics dismissed it, but veterans loved it. They said it captured the small moments of survival. The exhaustion of digging in, the numbness after killing. Years later, a restored version called The Reconstruction brought Fuller's vision back to life. It became clear this was no ordinary war film. It was a confession, a love letter to fallen brothers, and a warning about what war does to memory. Today, The Big Red One stands beside Saving Private Ryan as one of the truest depictions of the soldier's perspective. Fuller's line says it all. Survival is the only glory in war. Number 10. Storming Juno, 2010. Storming Juno came decades later, but it earned quiet respect among veterans, especially Canadians who felt forgotten in most D-Day stories. This television film dramatized the Canadian assault on Juno Beach through 3 soldiers, a paratrooper, a tank commander, and infantrymen. It was modest in budget but enormous in heart. Unlike big Hollywood spectacles, Storming Juno focused on human scale. Soldiers waiting in landing craft, their faces ghost white. The beach erupting in artillery. The struggle to push inland through machine gun nests and hedgerows. Every moment feels lived in because it was drawn from real diaries and interviews. The filmmakers faced pressure to make it more dramatic. They refused. Instead, they recreated events with military advisors and surviving veterans watching closely. Many cried during filming. They said the actors captured the fear they still carried 60 years later. Behind the scenes, the production was grueling. Shot in stormy weather with real explosions and heavy gear. Cameras jammed from sand and seawater. Extras collapsed from exhaustion. Director Tim Wolochediuk insisted it had to feel real or it was worthless. When it aired, it did not break records, but it won deep gratitude. For once, Canada's role in D-Day was told with dignity. Veterans praised it for its honesty and humility. There were no stars, no glamour, just courage and loss. Storming Juno proved that even small films can carry the weight of history when made with respect. It stands as one of the most authentic D-Day portrayals ever put on screen. Number 9. Theirs is the Glory, 1946. Theirs is the Glory remains one of the most remarkable and overlooked war films ever made. Shot barely a year after the war ended, it used no professional actors. Every man seen on screen was an actual veteran of the Battle of Arnhem. They returned to the real streets where they had fought and bled to reenact the battle that had scarred them for life. Directed by Brian Desmond Hurst, it blurred the line between documentary and drama. There were no sets, no tricks, no studio lighting. Burned-out tanks and bullet-riddled houses were still standing. Many of the extras had lost friends on the very ground where the cameras rolled. Some reportedly broke down during filming. One sequence was halted when veterans refused to march past the building where their comrades had died. The British War Office hesitated to support it, fearing the emotional toll on participants. But Hearst pressed on. He said history should be told by those who lived it. The result is haunting. No Hollywood polish, just faces that have seen too much. The film was banned in several European countries temporarily for being too raw for post-war audiences still grieving. Theirs is the Glory eventually gained cult status among historians and soldiers. It stands as both film and memorial. When veterans watch it, they are not seeing actors. They are seeing ghosts of themselves frozen forever in a moment of sacrifice and disbelief. Number 8. Ike, Countdown to D-Day, 2004. Unlike most war movies, Ike, Countdown to D-Day never shows combat. Yet veterans, especially officers and planners, respect it for portraying the unseen battle before the battle, the one fought in map rooms and mines. Tom Selleck gave a restrained, powerful performance as General Dwight D. Eisenhower in the tense weeks leading up to the invasion. No grand speeches, no slow-motion heroics, just strategy, fear, and the crushing weight of responsibility. The film depicts Eisenhower balancing politics, egos, weather reports, and the moral burden of sending thousands to their deaths. Produced for television, it faced early skepticism. Executives worried audiences wanted explosions, not meetings. But military historians applauded its authenticity. Real documents and communications from SHAF headquarters were recreated. Veterans who served under Eisenhower called it the most honest portrait of leadership under fire. Behind the scenes, the film faced near cancellation after financing problems. Selleck agreed to cut his salary to keep it alive. The production used declassified photographs and transcripts recently opened to the public. Every map on screen was a replica of the originals used in June 1944. Ike, Countdown to D-Day was not made for spectacle. It was made for truth. It showed that courage does not always hold a rifle. Sometimes it signs an order it knows will haunt it forever. Veterans recognized that burden and respected the film for carrying it with silence and dignity. Number 7. D-Day, 6th of June, 1956. D-Day, 6th of June was released during a time when audiences still wanted romanticized war stories. But beneath its surface, it carried a quiet melancholy that resonated with those who had lived the invasion. Directed by Henry Koster, it followed two officers, an American and a British soldier, both in love with the same woman as they prepare for the Normandy assault. At first glance, it seems like a melodrama, but the deeper story is about how personal emotion collides with duty and death. The final act, when the soldiers land at Normandy, is surprisingly restrained and grim. No triumph, just fear and fatalism. The film drew criticism from censors who claimed it was too defeatist. American studios wanted victory and pride. Koster gave them reflection and regret. Some theaters refused to screen it on Memorial Day, fearing backlash from patriotic groups. Behind the scenes, production was fraught with studio tension. The director clashed with executives who wanted to cut the bleak ending. Koster refused. He insisted that war does not always end with survival. The result was a film quietly admired by veterans who saw through its romantic poster art. They recognized the honesty in its subdued tone. Over time, D-Day, 6th of June, gained respect as an early attempt to humanize the invasion without propaganda. It became one of the first Hollywood films to admit that behind every victory banner there were stories of lost love and unspoken grief. Number 6. The Americanization of Emily, 1964. At first glance, The Americanization of Emily seemed like a strange choice for a D-Day film. It was darkly funny, even cynical. Yet among veterans it struck a nerve, because beneath its satire it told a painful truth about how war turns heroism into madness. James Garner played Lieutenant Charlie Madison, a naval officer who wanted nothing to do with glory. He supplied luxury goods to commanders' whiskey, caviar, and silk sheets while avoiding combat at all costs. But fate and bureaucracy sent him straight into the D-Day invasion, where he accidentally became a national hero for something he never intended to do. The film's script by Paddy Chayefsky, who later wrote Network, was biting and controversial. It openly questioned the idea of hero worship and military propaganda. During the Cold War era, this was dangerous ground. The Pentagon refused to cooperate. Some congressmen labeled the film anti-American, yet veterans who had seen The Waste of Normandy saw something different, a film that dared to say the quiet part out loud. Behind the scenes, director Arthur Hiller fought studio pressure to make the film more patriotic. He refused. He wanted it ironic and human. James Garner later said it was his favorite film because it captured the absurdity he had witnessed firsthand during his own service in Korea. When it premiered, it was too bold for its time, but over decades it became respected among soldiers who recognized its grim humor. The Americanization of Emily remains a reminder that war is not only about courage, it is also about the lies told to make death palatable. Number 5. The Big Picture, D-Day, 1955. Before Hollywood epics and CGI recreations, there was The Big Picture, D-Day, a documentary episode made by the U.S. Army Signal Corps. It was not entertainment. It was education. Real footage, real faces, real fear. This weekly television series was meant to preserve the history of World War II for Americans who were beginning to forget. The D-Day episode became its most powerful installment. Using combat footage shot by frontline cameramen, it chronicled the invasion with chilling realism. There was no narration of glory. Just orders shouted through static, sand flying, soldiers falling. The government at first restricted some of the footage, too graphic, too personal. Families might see their sons die on screen, but veterans demanded its release, arguing that truth should not be hidden. Eventually, it aired uncut and shocked viewers who had only known the invasion through sanitized newsreels. Behind the scenes, the film crews had risked everything. Many were killed before the reels even reached shore. Their cameras were found buried in sand days later, still intact. Those reels became part of this documentary. Today, The Big Picture, D-Day, is shown in military academies and museums. It remains respected by veterans not because of production value, but because it is real. It reminds viewers that the invasion was not a movie set. It was chaos filmed by the men who lived only long enough to capture it. Number 4. The Devil's Brigade, 1968. While technically focused on the Canadian-American Commando Unit fighting in Italy and southern France, the Devil's Brigade earned the respect of veterans for its authenticity and spirit. Many who served at D-Day saw themselves reflected in its depiction of raw soldiers forged into elite warriors. Based on the true story of the 1st Special Service Force, the film starred William Holden as the grizzled commander turning misfits into heroes. Though not set entirely on the Normandy beaches, it carried the same blood-soaked energy of the invasion films that followed. Real paratroopers assisted in training the actors. The stunt work was brutal. Every jump, every explosion performed live with no safety nets. During production, military advisors pushed for accuracy down to insignia and weapon weight. The studio clashed with them, wanting more glamour. Director Andrew V. McLaglen sided with the soldiers. He told his crew that authenticity was the only tribute worthy of the men it portrayed. When released, critics brushed it off as just another war movie, but veterans recognized its honesty. The dirt, the exhaustion, the brotherhood. It captured what it felt like to be part of something larger than yourself while knowing death was always one step away. Over time, the Devil's Brigade found a loyal following among military historians. Many D-Day veterans considered it a spiritual companion to their own experiences. It celebrated courage without boasting, discipline without cruelty, a rare balance that few war films ever achieved. Number 3. When Trumpets Fade, 1998. When Trumpets Fade wasn't widely seen when it first aired. It had no glamorous posters, no blockbuster stars, no patriotic speeches, but veterans, especially infantrymen, quietly embraced it as one of the most brutally honest portrayals of frontline terror ever filmed. Though set during the Battle of Hurtgen Forest, its spirit mirrors the psychological collapse soldiers faced in Normandy's aftermath. The film follows Private David Manning, a young man desperate not to be a hero. He doesn't want medals. He doesn't want glory. He just wants to survive another hour. His haunted eyes, trembling hands, and exhausted movements spoke to veterans in ways most D-Day films never dared to show. Behind the scenes, director John Irvin, himself a war correspondent, refused Hollywood polish. Costumes were soaked, stained, and shredded daily. Actors were pushed through mud so thick they could barely move, mimicking the paralyzing terrain real soldiers described. The film was nearly canceled for being too bleak, but when it finally aired, veterans wrote letters saying it captured the fear they still couldn't talk about. No sweeping orchestras, no triumphant flags, just the loneliness of men abandoned by strategy, fate, and hope. When Trumpets Fade became a cult classic among soldiers who felt its quiet agony reflected everything they remembered, but rarely said aloud. Number 2. The Thin Red Line, 1998. The Thin Red Line arrived the same year as Saving Private Ryan, yet it became something entirely different. A meditation on war's invisible wounds. Veterans who watched it didn't talk about explosions or tactics. They talked about the silence, the stillness, the way the film captured the fracture between nature's beauty and humanity's brutality, a feeling many remembered from Normandy's hedgerows. Terrence Malick directed with a philosophical lens. Instead of focusing on one hero, he let thoughts drift across soldiers like wind through grass. Fear, guilt, longing for home, the unbearable weight of killing. Veterans recognized this inner monologue instantly. It was the voice they'd lived with for decades. The production was a battlefield of its own. Malick often tossed scripts aside and asked actors to react to real explosions without warning. Many sequences were shot only once. The sweat, the shaking hands, the frantic eyes, they were real. Advisors who had served in World War II said the film captured the mental fog that overtook men under fire. Critics praised its poetry but struggled with its quiet darkness. Veterans understood. They said the Thin Red Line showed the part of war soldiers carry forever, the part no metal touches. It is less a war film and more a confession whispered to anyone willing to listen. Number 1. The Victors, 1963. The Victors never became a household name, but among veterans it holds a quiet, enduring respect, because it dared to show World War II without glory, glamour, or patriotic comfort. Directed by Carl Foreman, a blacklisted screenwriter who knew something about moral conflict, the film followed American soldiers across Europe in the months leading up to and after the D-Day invasion. Its bleak honesty shocked audiences in an era that still preferred triumph over truth. Though not solely a D-Day film, its Normandy sequences struck veterans with painful accuracy. Exhausted infantrymen wade through rain-soaked hedgerows, terrified, confused, and grieving more than their fighting. Foreman shot these scenes using handheld cameras, natural light, and long stretches of silence, mirroring how real soldiers remembered the invasion. Not cinematic, but cold, muddy, and disorienting. Behind the scenes, the cast trained with military advisors who had actually landed at Omaha and Utah. They drilled in full gear, crawled through mud, and rehearsed scenes only after enduring exhaustion. The emotional toll was so intense that several actors said it was the hardest shoot of their careers. The most controversial moment, a Christmas Eve execution of a deserter, was based on real wartime records. Studios begged Foreman to remove it. He refused. Veterans later praised him for acknowledging a truth Hollywood never touched. War is not just about victories. It is also about the moral weight soldiers carry long after firing stops. The Victors remains a haunting, unflinching portrayal of the human cost surrounding D-Day. Not celebration, not spectacle, just the ache of survival. Every generation rediscovers D-Day through film, some with glory, some with grief. But only the honest ones earn a salute from those who were there. These 15 works capture not just war, but humanity stripped bare. Which one moved you the most? Tell us in the comments. Like, subscribe, and keep history alive through remembrance.